Hi, my name is Danielle Hicks, and this is my book report on Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. This book follows a young woman named Clarice Starling, who is an FBI agent in training, and she gets assigned by her boss named Jack Crawford to go and talk to a man named Hannibal Lecter, a surgeon who turned serial killer cannibal and he's in a mental hospital. When she goes to the mental hospital, her boss gave her a questionnaire, so a whole bunch of questions that she was meant to ask Lecter. She goes in there, and she meets the head of the facility named Frederick Clifton. He's kind of weird at first. He asks her out on a date. She declines, and then he goes on to tell her that she is just Lecter's type of woman. And he doesn't mean that like woman to date. He means that like woman to eat. Now while there, Clifton tells her that during one of his assessments, he did bite a nurse's entire face off, like the whole side of her face. He chomped completely off. And Clarice didn't back down. She still walked in, and she walked past all the cells to Hannibal Lecter, which was all the other inmates had barred cells, and Lecter had a whole see-through wall, and there was a chair for Clarice to sit down. She had a whole bunch of questions from Crawford, but what really Lecter was upset, or not really upset, but he was kind of sad about, not sad, he was kind of broken up about, was that Crawford sent a trainee to talk to him. And he felt so, like, unworthy. Like, he felt like he was better than that. Like, he was so much more worthy than a trainee. Like, he deserved better. And the fact that Crawford sent in a trainee was so disrespectful to him. So, he was very stone cold to Starling, not really opening up, giving short answers. So, Starling just decided just to leave. There was nothing she was going to get out of him, so why try? As she was leaving, next cell over to Lecter's was a man named Miggs, and he threw his semen on her face. And Lecter screamed for Clarice to come back, so she ran back over, and he told her that he doesn't like unpoliteness that Miggs just gave her, and that he doesn't like seeing women disrespected like that. So, although confused, Clarice shook it off, kept her stone cold face, and left the mental facility. She then got a call from her boss, Jack Crawford, that Miggs, the man who did that thing, was unalived himself after having a serious talk with Lecter. Later, it was found that another victim, or a new serial killer named Buffalo Bill, who is known for skinning his victims alive. He chooses more of a heavier body weight for women that he likes his victims to be, but he was skinning them alive. And this particular victim, they found a victim, and this particular victim had dirt under their nails, and what was unique about them was that they had a moth that was lodged in their throat. But it wasn't just any moth that they found. It was a particularly type of moth called death head's moth, I'm pretty sure. And it was not known to be in the wild. It was homebred. Like, it was made, this is a particular moth that wasn't common. And it was like somebody was very into butterflies and moths because they were growing them in their homes. So after taking them to a bug expert, they figured all of that out, and they were still confused. They had that big lead about the moth, but nothing else. And then a U.S. Senator's daughter named Catherine Martin went missing. She walked out of her home one day and saw a man struggling to get a chair into his van. He had a broken arm with a cast over it and was having a hard time. Now, being a nice person, Catherine went up to him and decided to help him, for when he shoved her into his van and hit her with the chair repeatedly over and over again. Once she was weak and down on the floor, he cut open her shirt, but before, he asked her what size she was and guessed it, asking if she was size 14. Now, cutting her shirt, he was happy with seeing that he was correct, and he threw the shirt out of the van before driving away. Now, Catherine had a cat up in the window that was watching this whole thing go down, and I really liked this chapter because it really shows how animals, they see everything too. They just don't have the voice to say it, and I liked how the author really included the cat just sitting there watching all of this go down, but completely cannot do anything to help its owner at all. So after figuring out that U.S. Senator's daughter, Catherine Martin, was missing, a lot of pressure was added to the FBI. They had the serial killer going out, and now they have taken the U.S. Senator's daughter. Added pressure was happening with the FBI, and they were freaking out a little bit. So Jack Crawford has Clarice go back to Lecter to try to get information, anything she could, about what was happening with Buffalo Bill. She didn't really get much on the second visit, but she mainly revealed more about herself than she got more information out of Lecter. She told him that she was in a farm. When she was a little girl, she was at a farm. She lived there. And she woke up one night to hearing screams. She went outside to seeing lambs being slaughtered. And being scared, she took one of the lambs and she ran away, never returning to the farm again. She then couldn't carry the lamb much longer, so she stopped, and then she was taken to an orphanage after being found. And she talked about having nightmares of lambs screaming and how they never stopped since that day. And she can never, ever get rid of them. And Lecter was very intrigued by this little information about these nightmares. With Starling, he was very, very wanting to know more about her, very intrigued by really anything to do with her. He wanted to read her, but he was having a hard time reading her. And so then Lecter comes up with this deal that if I will give you information about Buffalo Bill, if you get me out of here, not if you move me to another state hospital. He didn't want to be in that one anymore. He didn't want to be with Clifton. He didn't want to see him ever again. He hated that man more than anything. And he wanted to be moved to a different place. A change of scenery is what he said. He wanted a change of scenery. He was done looking at the same walls and the same furniture and the same people every day. And he was done. So Clarice said, okay. And he told him, and Lecter told her to start looking into gender clinics and for people who were denied surgery, gender reassessment surgery, and to look more into that. Clarice took that information and she went with it. She left the hospital, but not before being stopped by Clifton himself, who was listening to their conversations and saying, hey, girl, you can't do that. You can't strike a deal with him and say that you can move him. Only the U.S. Senator can do that, by the way. Like, nobody has any, right to move Lecter at all from his where he's at right now. And she was like, okay. She kind of already had the information that she wanted, but she could persuade the U.S. Senator. I mean, the U.S. Senator's daughter was the one who was missing. So I think Clarice was scared of Lecter a little bit. So she was willing to hold up her end of the deal the best she could. Anyhow, so she looked into the gender facilities and she came up with a couple names, but one was named James Glubb. Now, she went over to his house, and while she was there, she saw a particular moth there. A moth. Not just any moth, the moth. So she went in the house. And when she went in, she saw a decomposing body in the bathtub. Continuing her walk, she then finds Catherine Martin in the basement. And it was disgusting in the basement. It was gross. And she felt a presence behind her. And Buffalo Bill was behind her with night vision goggles. And she turned around and she shot, killing Buffalo Bill. Now, Buffalo Bill, or James Glubb, his whole entire purpose for killing women was to skin them to make a woman suit for himself. That's all he wanted, was to become a woman. And there were some parts in the book that I don't really want to talk about of him in front of a mirror, kind of trying to hype himself up on being a woman. It's very vulgar, so I'm kind of just gonna skip over. But he was just trying to hype himself up on being a woman, and that if he were a man wanting to approach him, that he would definitely be with himself. So after all this happened, Clarice then graduates. She is now an FBI agent, but something happened in the state hospital, in the mental hospital. So Hannibal Lecter stole a pen off of Clifton when he was being handcuffed one time. And so ready for dinner, since when he was getting ready for dinner, how Hannibal had dinner was they handcuffed him, they put down his food, and then they unhandcuffed him, and they left him. While he was being handcuffed, he put the nib, I had to look at that, like the nib of the pen in his mouth, and he used that to pick the lock. With the handcuffs, he handcuffed one officer, and with the other officer, he beat and started eating his face. And then he did the same to the other officer. Now here's where it gets insane. He puts the outfit of the other officer on and puts the officer's face on his face. And then, looking wounded, the officers there, the ones that are walking in and witnessing this, think Lecter escaped. And they go and tend to the officers laying on the floor. Now, they picked up Lecter, who has a dead officer's face on his own, skinned, and put him in an ambulance, taking him to the hospital. Now, Lecter runs out of that ambulance, takes the face off, and he flees away. At the end of the book, it's Clarice getting a letter from Hannibal Lecter. And this is where my favorite line comes from, is this letter is that he talks about with her. He asks her if she ever got silence from the lambs, which, the book. And then he proceeds to say that some of our stars are the same. And that was my favorite line in the book, because he's talking about how him and Clarice are kind of more alike than they thought. They're both really smart, and they will both do whatever it takes to get what they need in that moment. And that's just the best that they can do. For my question of choice, the character that I thought really had the most growth was definitely Clarice. She was able to overcome her nightmares of the lambs, because at the end of the book, sorry, I forgot to say this. At the end of the book, she had, the last line of the book was her sleeping peacefully, silence, and there was silence from the lambs. The lambs were silent. So she was able to sleep without any nightmares at all. And, but she had the most growth. I mean, she was able to overcome these nightmares. And I think the real reason why she was having so many nightmares was because she never spoke out to anybody but Lecter about everything she was having inside. She was trying to interview and trying to get information out of someone when she never opened herself up and really let herself go. She was able to get that weight off her chest. And I think also finding and killing Buffalo Bill really helped her too. I mean, she was able to really grow from that experience. And I think she definitely had the most growth. But that's the end of my book report. I really liked this book. I was honestly a little bit worried because I was really like late on reading it. But this last month I really crammed into it, and I really enjoyed reading it. It was a little bit hard to me. I got stumped a little bit sometimes just because it's a lot to process. I mean, a lot of it was like almost giving me whiplash what was happening every single chapter. And so I was really shocked about most of the stuff that was happening. I mean, I didn't expect Buffalo Bill at all to want a gender reassessment surgery, and I didn't expect Lecter to bite an officer's face off to leave. But in all, it was a very good book, but I kind of think I was just a little bit too young to fully grasp all of the entities of this book. I mean, I'm sure I didn't really get like a deeper meaning than I wish I could. Kind of when we go over the Great Gatsby and stuff, like we go over into this deeper meaning in the words, and I just don't think I grasped onto that much. I think I just kind of got the main kind of gist of what was happening. But I do think it's a really good book. I would definitely like to revisit it when I'm a little bit older. But I really enjoyed it, so thank you.